So, this is a format of video that I don't typically do. I like watching reviews, but I really fell in love with music reactions because I think that's the most genuine opinion and raw feeling that you can give, experiencing music for the first time. Especially if it's right when it comes out, you're listening to it before you can have anyone else's opinions on it influence your own. But I do understand the appeal of reviews because you give the time for the music to marinate in you and your spirit. You get to listen to it a lot. Write out your points. You can script anything you want to say about it and develop a firm opinion. It's not often that I listen to something on this channel and I think something warrants that kind of listen. But if there's any band that does, it's Lunatic Soul. If you haven't heard of Lunatic Soul, this is the solo project from the absolute songwriting and artistic master, Marius Duda, the lead singer of the band Riverside, that are a bit more established, a bit more well-known, but I think I've grown over time to kind of prefer his stuff in Lunatic Soul just because I simply don't know another band like them. There are two main reasons why I opted to do a review instead of a reaction. The first being, that it's an hour-and-a-half long album, and I didn't want to be uploading a 2-hour-long video to try to decipher through. But the main reason is because Lunatic Soul's music, from my experience with their previous 6, you can call it 7 albums, but only 6 of them have vocals. I think Impressions is just kind of a little bit off in the side in terms of the storyline. So in terms of their 6 core albums, everything is very meditative, very spiritual, and it's a very individual experience. It's like when I'm listening to their music, even after having heard it many times, I don't want to be watched. I don't want to be with anyone having to explain it. When I listen to their music, it feels like I'm supposed to be working on self-discovery and self-healing while I'm doing it, searching deeper parts of myself that I don't always access, because this kind of music helps you access it in a way. And on top of that, the music's generally slower, quieter, very dynamic, and they're one of the only bands that I actually enjoy that have a very droning presence. Their music builds up sometimes, but there's lots of repetition, lots of mid-ranges and grooves that continue to repeat and almost just create this pattern that just gets stuck in your ears. And instead of becoming redundant, it really resonates with your soul and it almost starts to sound better and more appealing over time. A great example of that, I think, is their song Suspended in Whiteness on their second album, because there's this really strange, eerie bell sound that comes in that rings in and out, and it's very nerving, it's very jarring, the tone of it, but as it keeps going and looping under everything for the whole song, it gets so catchy and almost soothing in the end. By the time I finished listening to it for the first time, I couldn't believe that I actually thought it was helping me relax after hearing it come in for the first time. So with all that said, I didn't even bother considering doing a reaction for this, or I did briefly, but I had some of my peers tell me that it's kind of more of the same with a lot of those touch points for the band. So I decided to just put on a good pair of headphones, check this one out all the way through, write down some key points, how I'm feeling about it, and how it compares to their older stuff. Because one of the most interesting things about Lunatic Soul is that not only does he do concept albums, but the entire album cycle, all the albums that he's created with Lunatic Soul, combine into this kind of circle and touch different points. It's an entire looping story that starts and repeats, and you can listen to on loop for as long as you want. And the interesting thing about this album is that this is both the end of the story, meaning the last album that he's ever gonna make, as far as I understand, under the Lunatic Soul name. But chronologically, lyrically, and topically, this is actually the first album you're supposed to listen to in the cycle. So if you are to listen to all the albums back to back, in terms of content, you would start here, and you would end with their 2017 album Fractured. In an interview a while back, Marius charted this all out into a bit of a triangle kind of shape, and I tried my best to portray that for you guys here. I kind of designed it out on a slide, and it looks complicated, but everything touches point in a very symmetrical way. And as I was mentioning earlier, for those who are familiar with this, I left Impressions off because, one, it's all the way in the corner. It would have been in that top right of the death side of things in between the first 2 albums, and there's nothing to balance that out on the life side, so I wanted to keep it symmetrical in terms of the story. But these are also the only albums that have vocals and actual physical storyline. But as you can see here, the new album, sticking in on the left, And this is split directly down the middle with albums that focus on death and albums that focus on the side of life. And that doesn't necessarily mean good and evil, happy and sad. Like, for example, the album Walking on a Flashlight Beam that's still up on that life side focuses a lot on themes of suicide and that kind of prevention, still in the living state, but very much teetering towards that darker end. In between Walking on a Flashlight Beam and the self-titled album, there are 2 tracks at the end of Walking on a Flashlight Beam, the final 2 tracks of the album, that are supposed to connect the albums thematically. Same with Through the Shaded Woods into Fractured. And at the bottom we have Under the Fragmented Sky, where the first half of the album falls into the death side, and then you transition into the lighter end, moving into Fractured. The death side of the albums, he said in the interview, focus more on organic, natural instrumentation, lots of acoustics, bongos, tribal instruments, tribal patterns, and then you focus on a more electronic, synth-based. On the life side, it's a bit more futuristic, a bit more upbeat, a bit more groove-oriented. But none of these albums were constructed in chronological order. We get the debut into the second album, but from there it goes into the 2020 release Through the Shaded Woods, into the 2018 release, back to 2017, to now, and then all the way back to 2014 to complete the cycle. So I think it's very interesting that while his sound has evolved over time, while there's so many different directions that he's gone in and experimentation that's happened, it's all been purposeful, it's all been planned, and it all combines into this beautiful, beautiful story of life and death, rebirth, discovery in between astral planes, and we finally have the missing piece here released. Now, you would have noticed that The World Under Unsun falls on the farthest left on the life spectrum of his albums, on the shape there on the graph, which means naturally it's going to be his happiest album, obviously, right? Well, it ends with the saddest song that he's ever written, and that's my only Lunatic Soul related video on my channel, was my reaction to that. It was the 3rd single put out in this album cycle, and if any of you have watched that reaction, you will know exactly how I felt and how I thought about that. That song touched me on a truly, truly special level. It's a perfect song. It might not be a song that I can return to all that often because it really is that emotionally dense and beautiful. There are definitely signs of life on here. Don't let the darkness and the somberness of that song steer you away, because the moods and the tones on this album kind of shuffle like a parabola in a graph. There's plenty of highs, down to lows, back up and down, and I think it hits a lot of touch points that are covered on all of the previous albums without truly defining its own sound, which is interesting. It kind of makes sense as a double album that it would touch on points of all of the previous albums, but in that same way, it is kind of only scratching the surface of all the previous tones that were reached, and it doesn't fully dive back into anything, which you would hope for. You want every album to have its own unique sound, but at that same time, I don't think it pushes a ridiculous amount of boundaries. Mariusz is just really sticking to what he does well here, and it really sticks for the entire 90 minutes. This album does not feel like 90 minutes when you listen to it. It's a short listening experience. If you put on some headphones and lay down to it, it'll feel like 40 minutes and it's over, because all the songs blend into each other super well. The transitions are nice and seamless, even though each song almost plays its own role. There aren't a lot of repetitions in terms of song structure or anything else. And I think that is my biggest positive takeaway from this album, and the one thing that stands out from any previous release from them, the atmosphere that he creates is off the charts. It is incredible. There's so much subtle pad work and these soaring vocals that are pushed back under the mix in these songs that make you sound like and feel like you're flying. You feel like you can almost hear air and wind whispering around your face as you listen to this album, and you can hear it in his vocals too. The production on the vocals is very wispy and airy. He's completely flying over all the grooves, and I think that atmosphere goes a long way to portray the feelings on this album. With that said, and while I do think the vocal production matches the general production of the album, I wish he was able to project more. I know it's not on the death side of things in terms of the spectrum, but there have been songs in the past, albeit darker, where he really projects himself completely, and you can feel the passion and the raw emotion tearing out of him. Those are some of my favorite songs that he's ever put out. I don't think we really had a standout vocal performance on this album. He still sounds great. His falsettos are excellent. He has the voice of an angel, but I don't think it was as well distributed throughout this album because it's quite buried under the production and the reverb and all of this. I wish he was a bit further front in the mix. He did say that this is his favorite album he's ever made. He thinks it's his best album. And I don't know if you can necessarily say that if his vocals are so buried, if he's saying things that are so meaningful. On top of that, I do think some of the vocal cadencing is a bit strange. The vocals and the delivery is a bit more of a spoken word at times. He's trying to fit a lot more into what he's saying. It's a bit more literal, a bit more to the point, I guess you could say. There are some moments where like syllables in the middle of words fall on the downbeats and it feels like he's kind of like squeezing the last bit out of the toothpaste, if you will, trying to like shove everything out before the measure ends. And it doesn't sound all that natural all the time. But that's really the only complaint, those two things vocally, that I can have on this entire album. Because I think, again, the flow of everything is absolutely exceptional. Some of the rhythms and the melodies, they sound a little bit simpler at first on this album. Or sometimes they kind of suck the moisture out of things and you think, this feels a bit simple for him. And then all of a sudden you hear these 5 or 6 things going on in the back of the mix. And these synths that you've never heard, sound effects that you couldn't even dream of. And you're thinking, how'd they even get there? And they've worked this melody into a whole unit where there's a harmony going on up here, and then every few downbeats you get something here, and then they all combine and hit something on a downbeat further down the line, and it's just this whole moving organism that builds itself up. The veins connect, the limbs connect, it's all moving, it's expanding, and then it goes back down before it builds up again. And the whole album connects like that. It plays through fantastically, and it's just such a great expression. It really is. It's really hard to point out standout tracks and individual moments on this album because I think it really plays through as a body of work. And I've struggled to even think of it in that way because when picking it apart song by song and comparing it to their previous albums, I've struggled to think that it's not their worst, honestly. But when you play it through as a whole experience and you take it all as one thing, I don't even think it's close. It's just such a beautiful listen. There are still standouts for me here and there. I think The New End, the final track, is the best song on the album. There's absolutely nothing I would change about that. A song hasn't gotten me that emotional in a long time. I think a lot of the ballads probably are the better moments on the album individually, and it makes sense because they're shorter songs, they're a bit catchier, they're able to stand out as their own moment, like Good Memories Don't Want to Die, and Torn in Two in particular. That chorus and that descending piano part, it really is just Marius's forte at the end of the day. I also really liked the melody in Confession because it had this kind of eerie familiarity to it, but without being able to tell or recognize what it's from. So it was a nice, comfortable listen, a little bit more uplifting. Though I do kind of feel like it could have even started the album. It has a build-up that feels like it's starting a completely new chapter, but it's buried so far in the album that I don't feel like that release was fully there. But that subtle familiarity continues throughout the whole album because there are plenty of callbacks and Easter eggs to previous parts of different albums and songs, things that you can barely notice if you're not just a huge fan of the band. One example is another one of my favorite songs on the album, The Prophecy, which was the second single. A beautiful song, beautiful build-up, and one of the most unique for his standards on the album. The way it's structured, a bit more movement, more of an interesting drum part that's a bit more dynamic. But the piano part that opens the song is a callback to a bit of a slower synth moment that happens about 6 minutes into the song Battlefield, which comes off of Fractured, the album that this is supposed to chronologically follow up. And if you look at Mind Obscured Heart Eclipsed, the longest song on the album, pushing 12 minutes, there aren't specific callbacks, at least that I'm aware of in the song, but you can hear little elements of every single album in the discography so far in there. I was saying you could hear that throughout the album here and there, maybe thinking, oh, this song sounds a little bit more like Through the Shaded Woods, that kind of folkier, upbeat moment. There's some more tom work going on here, and then there are songs like Parallels, transitions that are just purely synth oriented that sound like From Under the Fragmented Sky or Walking on a Flashlight Beam. But if you take a minute or two in any given section of the song, it focuses on a different point in their career in this discography. And I think it's a great turning point in the album. It's one of the best pivots and one of the best long songs he's ever written, honestly. All in all, I think this is a fantastic album and one of the frontrunners for Album of the Year for me in 2025. And while I don't think it pushes as many boundaries as some previous albums and maybe doesn't have as many standout moments, tracks like Wanderings or Adrift, Thousand Shards of Heaven, I don't think it has nearly as many skips either or as many uncomfortable moments. This album is a very glossy, soothing listen. It's vulnerable music that makes you want to explore yourself, but it's not vulnerable in a Steven Wilson kind of way where it feels so personal that it's almost violating your space. This feels like it wants to get inside of you and give you a nice hug, embrace you, and encourage you to look inside yourself without feeling awkward about it. And it's a beautifully, beautifully subtle album in that way. This guy just simply doesn't miss with his songwriting. Wishing him all the best with this album, and let me know what you guys think of this, how you compare it to the rest of the Lunatic Soul discography. I'll see you guys next time.